What it do, what it do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. Thanks so much. I'm Jack Allweil. With me, as always, is my brother Alex Allweil. And if you're enjoying the show and you want to support the show, we are now partners with Encha Matcha for your book reading beverage. So see the link below for 20% off all of your products at Encha Matcha. So Al, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Jack. How are you?
Doing great. And we have a super fan and also our mother, who is so devoted that she has driven to a McDonald's in the freezing cold to use their Wi-Fi in her car. So Mama Brown, Cathy Brown, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm a little cold because it is 33 degrees out here. Although it's April and it's not, we're not having April showers, but we are having a very, very cold morning here in Michigan.
And Mom, you are the second person to reach the number 2 club, and that you've been on 2 times, with your first appearance being, was it episode 7 or 8 when we did the Constitution? Yeah.
Well, now but the Constitution, the program was broken into 2 parts. So technically, this is my 3rd time on your show. But it wasn't just the Constitution that we did. We did that really interesting book, In Our Defense.
Right.
Yeah, written by 2, at the time, I think they were law students, Carolyn Kennedy, the daughter of the former President John F. Kennedy, who's now the ambassador to Australia, and her classmate, Ellen Alderman. And I don't really know the biography of her, but so I think, just in my defense, this is my 3rd time.
Well, that is an argument.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
Well, Jack, what book are we doing today?
We are reading Underground, The Tokyo Gas Attack and the Japanese Psyche by Haruki Murakami. So I picked this book. I really liked Haruki Murakami's fiction, and I've read, I think, 3 of his fiction books in the past and really liked them. Definitely a different feel, a little bit more mundane life topics. And this book was the first nonfiction I had read of his. So, and I was also interested in Japan after going there. And I remember while we were on the undergrounds in Tokyo and people are literally packed like sardines, I remember feeling kind of scared. And so when I saw, and I did not know there was an attack on the subway line. So when I saw he wrote this book, I was interested, and that's why I picked it.
Yeah.
But so should we go around the horn with initial thoughts, or just the setup of these attacks in 1995?
I don't know. Why don't we go around the horn? I guess Mom is the guest. What were your initial thoughts of the book?
Well, my initial thoughts of the book, because I didn't know really much about the gas attacks, other than I thought they were horrific. And the sarin gas, I don't think I realized before I read this book that the poison attack was sarin, and sarin has been around for almost 100 years. It was used in the 1930s, and I had remembered it most graphically for my personal experience was seeing all the photographs that came out of Iraq when the ruler of Iraq used this gas on his own people and
yeah.
killed 250,000. So I was very interested in continuing reading the book. I thought it was well, heartbreaking, of course, and the descriptions of the people. I like the way the book was written because all the descriptions of the people came from the people themselves. These individual interviews, which were incredibly hard to get. People don't necessarily want to talk about this thing. So of all the people that he had been able to identify and then contact, there was a small number that actually would be interviewed by this guy. So I thought actually I thought it was pretty brave of those people to sit down and be interviewed by him. And I thought the book was pretty worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think?
So this book has the distinction on our illustrious podcast of being the first book I was not able to complete. While I found just the format, yeah, it was interesting, but I found it very, very repetitive. It's more or less reading like, I just struggled getting through it. It's reading the same kind of story over and over again, just from like a different perspective. It brought me back to that movie, I think it's called Vantage Point, from like the early 2000s, which was like where they just showed the same scene from like different angles, which was like cool for like 30 minutes. And then I like just couldn't focus anymore. The things I did like actually were readings that I did outside of the book. I found it interesting to go and read about I guess the group, I don't, AUM, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, that I think we'll talk about later. And then sort of like what Mom was talking about, I reread up on sarin gas, which I found interesting again, which I'm assuming it looked like it was outlawed internationally, but I looked up the production methods, and yeah, it seems pretty easy to make, which is kind of a scary thought. If you have a little technical know-how, you can make something that I think, I don't remember the exact dosage, but it was very, very low. I think it was like 0.3 milligrams was a lethal dose, and it was incredibly volatile. So it would be easy to make it an aerosol. And it's honestly a very unpleasant way to die, more or less causes asphyxiation in the body. So it's very unpleasant. And I think the side effects people were talking about also sounded very unpleasant, and you have really no idea of like the long-term lasting effects that they'll feel. But other than that, I found the book hard to get through. Jack, your thoughts?
I also did not make it through all of this book. I thought it was kind of slow to start, but I thought the more I read, the more different viewpoints, and it kind of made me rethink more on the idea of luck, and does luck even exist, and how you kind of define luck. And so that I kind of thought it reminded me of Man's Search for Meaning, honestly, in some of these people's responses, and like how one person can feel so devastated by one thing, and then another person can feel just so grateful to even be alive. So that's kind of what it was making me think about. Yeah. Why don't we, what you want to talk a little bit more about sarin gas and what it does from like
yeah, I mean, right. So it's a nerve it's a nerve toxin, so it blocks. So the way your nerves work is it's a chemical signal. So when you have, well, first, I believe it's an electrical. So when you have at the junction between nerves, you have this chemical called acetylcholine is released from one end of the nerve to the beginning of the next. And that causes a gradient, and that goes to the next nerve and produces a signal. So for the next nerve, for the next signal to be released from the end of the nerve, you have to remove the chemical that's called, or the compound that's called acetylcholine. So that is done by what's referred to as an enzyme, which is acetylcholine esterase, which just means it essentially degrades acetylcholine. So sarin blocks the enzyme. So you just have acetylcholine buildup between the junction between the two nerves, and when you have that buildup, you can't have a nerve signal transduce. So that essentially just means you're like almost always just firing. The signal on the nerve is just always firing. So you then you can't have any new signals. So you'll eventually just suffocate because your muscles will stop working.
Hmm.
I think some of the symptoms it said from small doses are more or less what was said in the book. You get really runny eyes, you get nauseous, dizziness.
And it also
Great
seemed like a lot
irritation.
of people, like it seemed dim. Like a lot of them reported like going into the office,
Yeah, could no
there's
longer
lights
see.
on and it just seems like it's dark outside.
Right. No stimulation. Essentially.
Yeah. And then the crazy thing was in the hospital, some of them were treated to, I guess, let them see more light, but then it was like too much on the other way. Like it was too bright after the medication. So a lot of these people were initially put on drips, it sounds like. And yeah, depending on how bad it was, days or weeks in the hospital.
Let me pull up it's a course made by Germans. Mom was right I believe in the 40s. It was a group of like 5 or 6 other sort of similar related toxins. I'm trying to look where the dosage is. Not seeing it. Okay, so it's looking like immediate danger is 0.1 milligram in a meter cubed area if it's volatile. So that's a pretty big space, and that is a very small dosage.
0.1 milligram would be like a drop.
Yes, probably even less.
I mean, I guess for some background, basically there was 5 different packages put on 5 different Tokyo lines. And one guy would go in with this packet rolled up in normally like magazine or newspaper, and then just poke it with like a sharp umbrella point and then walk off. Is that basically what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my interpretation.
And the people downwind were way more affected because they were getting a higher dosage, whereas you could theoretically be closer to the package. But if you were upwind on these tram cars, you luckily had it less bad.
I was surprised that just it attached to the clothing, and secondary exposure occurred from, like in the hospitals, people, the healthcare workers said that they started to feel ill until they realized that they needed to have all these victims take off their clothes.
Yeah. It's right. Sounds like it lingered.
Yeah, and they told the people visiting, I think there were 13 total deaths, I want to say. And some of the people that went to like the morgue, like they told them not to hug the corpses, but some of them I think did, sounded like. And that was, I don't know if it didn't sound like they had big effects, but they were telling them by that point to not even, don't touch the bodies.
Yeah. Well, Jack, you want to give some background maybe on the group that did this? And
So it's, I mean, I don't know a ton about, did we say supreme truth? Is that the definition we're going with?
yeah, it was
I think
Supreme Truth.
yeah, it sounded like the leader started going blind, and that's when he decided to start this cult. From what I gathered, it pulled from kind of a lot of different religions, Buddhism, Christianity, and it seemed like they were kind of obsessed with this idea of levitation. I saw some videos where he's like trying to like levitate in like a cross-legged position. It's kind of weird. I don't know. The thing I found kind of crazy about this cult was it seemed like they brought in very talented people, very educated people. And it sounded like they accomplished this by recruiting at some of the higher valued colleges. But I think a couple of the men that poked the sarin bags were doctors and engineers. So it's pretty crazy to think about.
Well, it's sort of like an interesting point if you go and hear like some of those affluent, like white males that then go up and join ISIS. It's like why? Like why would how do they get these individuals that are have a lot going for them in their lives to join up to these kind of crazy groups? It's just an interesting like thought. Like what makes someone want to join one of these things?
Well,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
um, one of the doctors that was interviewed in the book, I think it was near in the second half of the book, maybe, talked about the fact that he really thought his colleagues were shocked that he wanted to leave medicine working at this hospital and go and like give everything up. And he had explained it that he thought he could make more of a difference by joining this group, that some of the constraints of the Japanese like medical bureaucracy would be gone if he joined this group and practiced his medicine his way without the constraints. So he thought he would be helping more people and doing a much better job. And that was his take on why he was so adamant that he wanted to do it.
Because I got the sense like from ISIS, like the marketers of ISIS, I do think they are good marketers because they try. It seems like they prey on people that don't have a good family structure or are looking for a family type of atmosphere. But I didn't quite get the sense like from this group per se, like I did on ISIS. I'm not
Or
sure.
I mean, like any cult, like Scientology,
Mhm.
like I mean, these groups are getting, you know, at interesting people. I guess some you're right, some like people that are just lost, but you get some people that are very much from a outside perspective have everything going for them to join.
Mhm.
Like I don't think you can just say like I mean they're selling something like
Mhm.
and it's resonating with people like in some way. Um,
Well, I think Ahm's whole like premise was you had to die before you could be reborn, and the end of the world was going to be in the 1990s. That's kind of from what I gathered. That's kind of the backbone of this cult, for what that's worth. Um, I don't know.
Well, the author made a point in the second part of the book where he was describing what he thought had started or was the catalyst for the book, or not for the book, but for the group. And oh geez, he had used he used a couple of examples. He used the example of people walking in an airport, which, like in America, we've also, if you've traveled like in an airport, you've seen the Hare Krishnas in the front of the airport, and people just sort of, okay, there's a Hare Krishnas, they tolerate them. And like when I was in college, there were always like 2 or 3 Hare Krishnas walking through the dyad at U of M, that they were just always there. And I never thought that they were threatening to me. And I just thought that they're doing what they do, and I'm not interested in that, so I walk on. But the author was saying that when you'd see these people, these group members, like that the our Shara, the leader, ran for political office. I think it was like in 1990, and how he campaigned was he had a lot of music, and then he had the followers out in the streets dancing around. And it wasn't the same kind of reaction that people had as you would have with the Hare Krishnas. People would like look away, and he kept saying it was like I would see these people and have a sense of dread, and he couldn't describe what it was about the people or what they were doing that caused him the dread, but he felt it. And that was a common thread through what he had observed in the interviews and excuse me, the interviews that he had done, was this the sense of dread with the group.
What do we think about like some of the members? Like it felt like they knew what they were doing was wrong, and some of them even said like it felt like they didn't have like a choice. Like I guess how do we?
I think that's actually how it opened, right?
Yeah,
With the doctor saying
he felt so encapsulated.
I mean, I feel like you kind of always have a choice. So when I read that, I sort of thought he was weak-willed, but I'm obviously not in that position. So
Yeah, because it seemed to me like it was not really a violent group up until that point.
well, they had the other sarin attack that I guess we could talk about a little bit. The one I think a year before, where they tried to
Yes.
they tried to use sarin to assassinate some judges, but then they ended up just making it an aerosol and like blowing it through an apartment complex. And I think they killed like, was it 6 people, or do you remember, Mom?
No, I don't.
Oh, dang, I didn't
What
remember
was it?
that.
I think it was called the hold up, I can pull it up. The hold up. Matsuano attack, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it was used as like a precursor to, let me see, the Matsumoto sarin attack the previous year. So attempted assassination by on June 27th, 1994. 8 people were killed, 500 were harmed by sarin aerosol that was released from a converted refrigerator truck in the Kaiichi Heights area. It was done 9 months before the better known Tokyo subway sarin attack. I think at one point in the book they talk, I sort of skipped around. I somewhat skipped to the end, but the doctor, there was an interview of a doctor who was saying like when he started hearing the symptoms, he knew exactly what it was because they had dealt with this other sarin attack 9 months before, and he was frantically faxing out how to treat it to all the hospitals so they could be better prepared. He was like giving them like almost the cliff notes of like what you should be doing, which made it sound like it was somewhat fortunate.
Yeah, he probably saved many lives with getting that information out so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I too, that one interview that you talked about, Alex, the one where the guy, his quote was that when he found out what they were going to do, he had said, "I was surprised." And then he said, "I shuddered to think of all the victims that this would sacrifice." And he felt instinctual resistance, but his adherence to the principles of the group was so strong that he thought it was worth it. And in my mind, I was going over that thinking, what was the point though? What, what was the point of the group doing that they felt that they had to kill all those people in order to further the group? And the whole book, I never really got the answer to that question. What were they really after?
Right. At least in the first attack, there's a clear goal. Like it sounded like they were looking to assassinate some judges that were ruling on some of their members' cases. But I never got a picture of, like, I guess before we were talking about what's the difference, like what constitutes something as a terrorist group, and I thought you had to have a political agenda by definition. Is that correct, Mom?
I don't know. I don't know what the formal definition is.
Okay, well, I always thought it was you had to have some type of political agenda. So, like, to me, this group for this attack is, I think it's constituted as a terrorist attack, but I think it's just like crazy people, like doing I don't think I don't know what change they're trying to make. I thought you had to be trying to incite some type of change that you want.
Oh, no, I think they clearly were trying to incite a change. I just never could figure out what the purpose of what the change was that they wanted. Like, this group is compared with Ted Kaczynski, and Ted Kaczynski wrote his manifesto, and which
So, well,
he's
Mom, can you explain
a
who Ted?
Unabomber.
Okay.
Yeah, and he sent out packages through the mail of bombs, and when open, they exploded them. This happened in the United States, and when when the packages were open, they exploded and obviously caused either injury or death. And his manifesto was well, it's too complicated really to explain more than in like a nutshell, that he felt that the world was too complicated, too materialistic, and what he wanted to do was to get people to stop being so materialistic. And I guess that was his way of making the citizens understand and appreciate what needed to be done, because the world was going in the wrong direction. And people have compared this group, the On group, with sort of the teaching, or not the teachings, but the premise of the Unabomber's manifesto.
Did anyone write down. He took an excerpt from Kaczynski's manifesto. Does anyone have the page of that by chance? I've been trying to find it for.
I think I can find it if you give me a minute.
Because I actually felt like the excerpt, I really actually agreed with the excerpt in the book, which was like society tries, the paraphrase I felt like was society tries to make you conform. And if you want to be different, it like crushes you. And I felt like too, I kind of agree with that. Like, if you don't conform to like society norms to an extent, like you do kind of get pushed to the outskirts.
Yeah, and there was a line that they used, Japanese, saying that the nail that sticks up gets
Gets hammered.
hammered down.
Right.
I mean, it seemed like a lot of the people that were interviewed talked about how they are more materialistic. Now, I mean, I'm looking at a page even here. This is on page 65. Since the war ended, Japan's economy has grown rapidly to the point where we've lost any sense of crisis, and material things are all that matters. The idea that it's wrong to harm others has gradually disappeared. It's been said before, I know, but this really brought it home to me. What happens if you raise a child with that mentality? So I thought that was an underlying kind of, theme of the interviews. And the sense of like people just walking to work and not really stopping to try to help. That was like another kind of like thought experiment. Like, well, what would you do if you saw people like laying down? Maybe you thought it's just like a one-off person, or is there like danger there? Is that why they're not approaching those people?
The one guy that was like lying on the street because he was so sick was very angry that no one stopped to help him, and he made some comment about, well, yeah, maybe they thought that I had just been out partying the night before and I was just like really, really hungover, and they ignored me, but he wasn't. And so many people just walk by without helping somebody who's just lying on the street.
Yeah, there seems to be this like phenomenon, like the more people that are around, the less likely, anyone is to help, because everyone thinks someone else is going to do something about it. And I think there was one guy even commenting that if he could just crawl to this bus station, he thought there would be coworkers there that would, and he thought they would at least help him. But he like was recalling that he didn't think anyone would help him, even in the moment.
Exactly.
I would say if I saw one person down, I think I would help. If I saw a lot of people down, I would run away.
Yeah, because then it might signal, there's something like systemically wrong with something.
So just in like basic practice, if our doors have, like when we go into lab, our doors a lot of times have big windows on them. Like you have a door within like a clear window. If you see someone down, you're not supposed to go in. Like you're supposed to call, because that if you see someone collapse in a lab, it's indicative that there's some type of probably chemical that has caused that. So you need to call for help, not go in and try and help them, because you're just going to end up being on the ground as well. So right, so like if you were to see one person down in the street, you would probably just think they're a little sick, give them some help. But if you see like 10 people like down, I mean, at least me, I would think that there's been something is seriously wrong, and I don't want to be, preservation takes precedent, or takes the cake for me. So I would run away probably, but maybe I'm just selfish. I don't know.
Well, even if you run away, that doesn't mean you're not going to help, because you could contact the police.
Well, right, of course.
There was something interesting that I wanted to talk with you guys about too, on like how people recall stories, or how people are very like cause and effect. Like there was a lot of stories like, if I had just, woken up a little earlier or woken up a little later,
Yeah.
or this was the first time I sat, in this part of the train. I mean, and sometimes it was good. There was one guy that said he sat downwind of that sarin bag every single morning. And for whatever reason, he sat at the front that one morning, and that morning alone. And that's literally what like saved him. And he didn't believe in like good fortune up until then, but like that was, and that's kind of what I thought also about, like, how do you think of luck, and like, do you really believe in luck? And because I started listening to what other, like, I heard Pomp have a good discussion on luck, and he was saying that he started not believing in it because it's literally all subjective. It's it he talks about like in an army, like a van, one guy was sitting in one seat versus another seat. The one guy gets his leg blown off. The other guy that's unharmed says, man, you're like, I could have been in your seat. I'm so lucky, or you were so unlucky to be in that seat. And then the guy that got his leg blown off might say, I'm so lucky to have my other three limbs. I'm curious what you think on luck after reading these types of stories.
I sort of just think it's chance. I guess if you want to call it that. I don't know. I always think back to, I don't remember the exact progression, but there was a story I remember hearing in Sunday school where, it went like this kid gets a horse for his birthday and his friends tell him he's so lucky. Then he's riding the horse and he falls off and he breaks his leg, and his friends tell him, oh, he's so unlucky. And then the government comes to enlist soldiers for the war, and he can't go because he has his broken leg, and his friends tell him he's so lucky again. And then like his friends come back as like a war hero, and he wins over like the girl this friend loves, and his friends tell him he's unlucky again. I mean, it just sort of like changes through the progression of time, I guess, of like what could, I guess the same thing could both be considered lucky and unlucky for different reasons. I'm struggling to find how getting your leg blown off could be considered lucky, though.
But the guy is like, he's grateful that he's alive.
Yes.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
and that comes back to
true.
that like man's search for meaning type of mentality, where it's
That's
like
sort-
everything that happens to you, it's all like it's like all like probabilities, like some bad stuff, some good stuff. Like you bet one way and you just live with the consequences. But like the underlying thing, I guess, is just be
like
grateful for.
that's a mentality thing. If you're gonna have that type of mentality, you're gonna have it regardless of the situation, I think.
Right, but I guess the thing is just choose to be grateful for things, I guess, is the underlying.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the people that lost their child, who was interviewed, talked about, it was the first, I think this is the story, talked about the morning before, the morning of the attack. They had breakfast together, and normally they all lived together, but normally the son was in a hurry and would like grab like a coffee or a tea and be on his way. But this particular morning, they didn't do that. They actually sat down and had a breakfast, and it was sort of like, when you think about a memory of like the last time that you saw someone, this was for him, and he had described how nice he thought that was, that this could be one of the last things he remembered about his son, was sitting and actually being with him the morning of his death. And it was more than just the usual wakes up and out the door. And that for him was a lucky moment.
What about the one story that stuck out to me was the one guy that was in like I think the shrimp industry. They got gassed,
Oh,
went to work, said he was in pain, and then went home and divorced his wife.
Yeah.
What? Just use that as the reasoning of like divorcing his wife. I was like, oh my God, not where I thought that was going. Um,
That's actually, I've heard of that happening another occasions when there's trauma. People just think differently about like their relationships, and
I,
that's not unusual.
yeah,
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that 30 for 30. I think it was that guy that got lost in the desert running the ultra marathon. I think it happens with a lot of these ultra people. Yeah, like extreme thrill seekers. They realize through this experience that life is short, and then they start questioning everything or thinking they are able to do all these sorts of things and kind of cut ties with a lot of people. Or just go AWOL. But was that the guy that was like traveling in Colombia
yeah,
and then he like that guy was insane because I think the night before he went out with a coworker and the coworker suggested going back to the same bar.
and it got
And
blown up.
if they had gone back to that same bar, they would have been blown up because that bar got bombed. So he
Right.
felt incredibly, I guess, fortunate. And then, the following day he finds himself getting gassed.
Yeah.
Crazy. The thing is, like, you really can't comprehend how tightly packed some. Did you guys ride the subways at all in Osaka or Kyoto?
We rode a train.
I mean, so we rode like this JR Yamanote line, and I mean a lot of these stops like we were at, like Shinjuku, Akihabara. I mean, and in rush hour, it is just like slam packed. Like you could literally fall asleep because you're wedged in between people. Like that is how tight the people are. Like I would
Wow.
not fall over if I just like dozed off. And like, so I could see like if it was, but I mean, I would think it's the same in the morning, and you wouldn't be able to see anything on the floor necessarily because but it also sounds a couple of it sounded like 5 lines were gassed, and when they get to the end of the line, there's supposed to be people that come in and take out like trash, and it sounded like a couple of those trains did not get cleaned up. Like maybe it should have been spotted at the end of the line. I don't know, but I was definitely scared when I was riding those undergrounds.
Do you think that if that was part of your everyday, that you would have been scared?
No, probably not. I mean, I probably would have gotten used to it, but I was just like, wow, this is the most densely packed area I've ever been in. Because I've read I mean, there's a couple stadium, like there's been times in like the British Premier Leagues where the stadiums got too packed in a certain area and like a section collapsed, or people just got trampled and you don't even know you're walking on the other people. Just like all these crazy
Oh my
things
God.
happen when you're so densely packed.
Okay, I would think you wouldn't be on those trains if you were like going to the grocery store, because you could lose your packages.
Probably. Yeah.
You know, one of the other things that I thought about when, like, one of my, I was surprised that the people weren't angrier at the group. They didn't, there were very few of the people interviewed, the actual victims of the attack, that said, like, I'm just so angry. A few of them did, and then they immediately said that there should be a punishment for them, and pretty much everyone said it should be death. And it crossed my mind that I thought that Japan was a peace-loving country, and first I was surprised even to know that they had the death penalty. But so I was surprised that they that they talked about the death penalty at that stage. And then I did a little research on it, because I thought, well, maybe they do for like extreme extreme crimes, but it's just a general death penalty for that kind, for murder in Japan. And Southeast Asia, America, of course, the death penalty is legal in some states. In Brazil, it is as well for special circumstances. But then you go over to Southeast Asia, and it's common. And the countries where they say, like, we've put a ban on or a moratorium, they're basically executing the people on the spot if they don't have it. There was one example, I got interested in that, and I looked up death penalties in Southeast Asia, and there's one country where they banned the death penalty now, but the death penalty was mostly used in that country for drugs.
Mhm.
And what they did was, now instead of like arresting people, the police go in with guns, and if it's a drug raid, they just kill the people. So that, yeah, they don't have a formal death penalty, but it seems to serve the same purpose. It seems to be obviously way more random when you are just starting to shoot people, say, in a drug house, as opposed to arresting them and giving them some legal rights. So that sort of surprised me in the book.
Yeah, interesting.
Hmm.
Well, does anyone have any other thoughts?
I have one other thought that, well, actually, a lot of my takeaways were already discussed, but there was one thing that I noticed. There was uh, there was a comment or two about how the police should have known that this sort of thing was going to happen, because they had that sort of practice run before on another train line, which, Alex, I think you brought up. But the police also knew that several months before, that the house where this group functioned had been making sarin, and they didn't do anything about it. Like, they should have. No, they knew, and maybe it was just a failure of the police to find out what they were going to do. They couldn't find the poison. They couldn't track it down to stop it. And so there was a failure on the part of the police in following up on this lead, which was pretty significant. There's really no reason to be manufacturing that kind of poison.
Yeah, it's internationally outlawed.
Yes.
So you are correct. It's kind of weird that but nothing would be done about that.
Okay, what are you taking away from this book?
Really that they're just some crazy people. I didn't really honestly have any takeaways. Like I said, I couldn't get through it. Some of the outside readings I found pretty interesting, but that was about it. What about you?
I think the biggest thing that I found myself thinking about was like, yeah, the idea of like luck and chance. And the more I thought about it, yeah, I'm gonna just consider myself a lucky person from now on in everything that happens, regardless. So, and hopefully, I think that's the best way to go. Just consider yourself a lucky person.
Good.
That's
and
good philosophy.
Yeah.
All right.
And I actually, while I thought the beginning of the book was slow, I actually I liked reading about the same event from so many different people. So I actually think it was kind of cool. And if I ever wanted to write a book about an event, I think this might be an easy way to do it, because it's really just about compiling all the interviews. It's like, I don't know, I did kind of like it. But I think I'll probably stick to his fiction books more so in the future. But I did like the book.
I actually liked it too, and I did like also on the interviews that he did, like he'd have like a 1-sentence caption at the top of each person's interview. So he showed his significant takeaway from each of those people, and it was really like as Alex suggested, that one where the guy said he went home the next day and he told his wife he was getting a divorce. Like that's pretty big takeaway from a one-day event. And it really did, it's really thought-provoking, because all of us on our own went in different directions. And like I could see studying this like as in course material, because it leads to so many discussions about like capital punishment, cults, luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to thank you guys for having me on. It's always a thrill for me, just a private citizen who gets to come on and talk to the famous, the brothers on books. So thank you.
It's great to have you for a third time on the show.
The amount of times is still up for debate, but with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Allweil, and with me, as always, it's Jack Allweil. And then special guest, the Mama Bear, Cathy Brown. Jack, it was an interesting book, and I believe our next book is how to talk to anyone about anything. And until next time, thanks.
Bye.